Good evening, everyone. We have 6 agenda items for tonight. The first agenda item is trauma-informed care. We're going to give a presentation on the work that was done for the 18-19 school year and then look forward for the 19-20 school year. The 19-20 school year plan and contract will require board action. The second item is Stop the Violence grant partnership with DCIU. Mr. Marshallak will present this grant opportunity and the work that will be done at the high school. The third item, Mr. Salerno will present the elementary school youth court expansion. So we currently have youth court happening at our secondary schools, and this is an opportunity for our elementary students to also participate in this program. The fourth item, I will present the annual growth from MAP, our benchmark tests for the school year, or for 18-19 school year, and then look at some highlights and some areas of growth. And then the next item that I will present are elementary STEM resources, which will require board action as well. We'll end the night with policies. We have 4 policies to review, and they will require board action as well.
Okay, so the first agenda.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We are really excited to just give a recap of the work that was done in all of our schools this past school year and looking ahead to this coming school year with our partnership with Lakeside, NeuroLogic, and Josh and his team. Josh, to Greg's left here, is the director of the NeuroLogic initiative. Janine, to his left, is going to be the NeuroLogic lead coach for us. She was a coach that worked very closely with the secondary schools this year. And in addition to that, we have Nathan Swanson and Victoria Geppert, who are going to be our school-based NeuroLogic coaches at the elementary level and at the secondary level. And Nathan did work with our elementary schools this past year. This is work that again, we are very excited about. We feel that our working relationship with Lakeside NeuroLogic has been fantastic, and we're really excited to continue this work for next year. Some of the initiatives for this school year, this past school year, we had a 4-hour intensive kickoff presentation at Drexel Brook for the entire Upper Darby School District staff on August 23rd. Filled the room at Drexel Brook. It was a great presentation, focusing on brain basics, an introduction to trauma, and the trauma-informed classroom. In addition to that, we had NeuroLogic classroom observations and teacher coaching sessions happening throughout the district at every level. We had our Josh McNeil, the director, providing 4 professional development sessions per building throughout the course of the school year. So he was very busy bouncing around from school to school, and really, depending on the school, they use Josh in many different ways. Some in small groups with grade level meetings, some with an entire staff, some with action research groups. So we made great use of Josh, and he was a tremendous support for us this past year. In addition to that, everyone throughout the district had access to the online learning platform, and all Upper Darby teachers fulfilled their contract in service requirements this year by completing the online learning platform and the sequence of pre-recorded video professional development sessions, which all were narrated by Josh. So even if they didn't have a chance to get to interact with him in person, they did online quite a bit. Some of the tangible takeaways that we wanted to make special note of this year include calming music in the classrooms and during transitions throughout many of our schools. The utilization of brain breaks, and you're going to see a video here in just a moment, video testimonial from a few of our teachers, and they talk specifically about some of the brain breaks that they have been using. Calming corners and resolve room programs that have been implemented as an aspect of our work with NeuroLogic, fidgets and pedal bikes and resources like that, and just a general mindset shift throughout the school district when it comes to an understanding of a trauma-informed classroom and school district.
So I don't have a super scientific definition, but it's trying to meet the needs of kids who struggle as a result of some form of trauma.
Working with students with disabilities such as PTSD, anxiety.
If a child has gone through this, they're not going to be learning. They're someplace else.
It's a whole new way of looking at the child behavior and how trauma impacts them. When we first had the large in-service at Drexel Brook, we did a lot of talking about teachers, the trauma that we have in our lives, and how we react to student behavior. We learned to think about, where is this child right now that I'm dealing with in their brain?
We have so many students that have experienced very traumatic situations in their homes or otherwise, and so they often react in their brainstem.
You're looking at somebody who should be acting like a 14-year-old, but emotionally, because of what's going on, they're like 6.
And I started to realize this is work that we need to do with our kids.
That's kind of where we came in with this training and working with children who are working with different parts of their brain, and you learn kind of the signals of when a child needs a break. You see them kind of moving around, itching.
Sometimes you just need to stop. I mean, nothing is working.
And you can just, as an educator, see like, okay, if that child needs a break, then there's probably 5 other children that also need a break.
By understanding how those systems work, we have different activities that we can do that tries to help them get higher up in their brainstem.
Sometimes implementing one of those things is helpful.
I have a few children who have some difficulty sometimes controlling their emotions, and a lot of times if you just get them and go, okay, breathe, and you do it with them, and they start to calm down. And now it's grown to where now I do guided meditation with them, we do visualizations, and so I tied all of this in, and I always tell them they have their breathing with them all the time. So they can always stop, take a breath if they need to.
It's very hard for kids to stay focused for long periods of time, whether you're, lecturing, demonstrating, whatever you're doing. So we could do brain breaks.
There's different types of brain breaks too. There's some for energy, there's some for calming.
I love the gross motor challenges, which sometimes cause a lot of chaos in the room at first, and it releases energy for them, and so, sometimes that really helps them to come back and refocus.
I like to do stretching ones because oftentimes in my art classes we're focused on making art and working kind of hunched over. So we would stand up, raise your arms, breathe.
Anything can really be a brain break to students, as long as you get their focus out of what you're doing, just to use those different parts of the brain so they're not always just focused on the upper layer, but also working on those lower layers too.
One of the ways I've implemented trauma-informed care is the zone of regulations. I have a folder over on the door, and the zones are colored in over there: blue zone, green zone, yellow zone, red zone. Students recognize, after I've gone through and taught this to them, when they come in, if they're in a yellow zone or a green zone, they're good to go. But, and maybe even yellow too, they just might need something to calm them down, and they might grab for a little bit of Play-Doh. I had fidgets on the table, and they would just come in and take them. We use the bicycles. On the bottom of this chair right now is a kick. If they are high energy or they are feeling nervousness, they just kick. I didn't start out with the basket. I didn't start out with all of these different things. I started out with one of these, and once I taught them how to self-regulate it, it has made a difference. This has eliminated a lot of fights that could have happened in my classroom because students were able to separate, calm themselves down, determine whether or not it was something that they needed help with.
And I think it definitely builds relationships between the students and the teacher, because you're laughing together and you're talking about this, and it's not just what's in the book.
Every student can benefit from it, not just students who are diagnosed, but also any student who might have been struggling, having a bad morning, or had an argument, or worried about what they're going to go home to at the end of the day.
You just don't know what everybody is going through on any given level, at any given time. Just that little bit of extra. It's made my classroom a happy place. The students loved coming in here to learn because they knew if they were carrying something, sometimes this was the place where they would at least get a little bit of relief from whatever anxieties they were carrying on that day.
That's really what we want. We just want kids to be successful and productive, Even in art, many of them aren't going to go be artists, but they can incorporate this into their lives.
It's not that I'm just doing it right there in class and that's it. They use it throughout their day, and that's what I really focus on, is like, use it whenever you need to, use it when you can.
Anything that'll help engage our kids and bring a bit of civil discourse and caring and improving their life and our lives as we take this journey together is really what I'm all about.
So we began our journey with NeuroLogic by meeting with Josh and his team in my office and discussing what some of the outcomes we hoped we would have at the end of this school year. And Christine and Frank and Ed and myself talked about the fact that we felt that our school district needed to have, somewhat of a mindset shift with our adults and the people who work with our kids in terms of our reaction to students with challenging behaviors. And also we wanted our teachers to have some tools in their toolkit to be able to use with students who may have experienced trauma and as a result exhibit challenging behaviors. And in order to get a gauge, it's not a perfect gauge of course, but in order to get a gauge of how successful we were with that, we did put out a survey to our staff, and 263 of our teachers participated. And there are some positive results to that survey, even though only 263 teachers participated. 84% of them believed that it impacted the manner in which they interact with children. And I think that of all of the data, that is the most telling in my mind. 79%, this was the big one for me personally, 79% believed that it created a shift in their mindset, in the manner in which they think about kids who exhibit challenging behaviors. And 64% believed strongly or just agreed that they felt better prepared to meet the needs of students who exhibit challenging behaviors. And then finally, of the 263 participants, 67% strongly agreed that they would like to continue their work with NeuroLogic. So I think that demonstrates, even though it's only 263 teachers, success. And I want to also note that while there were only a few teachers in the video, Janine and Nathan touched the lives of many, many, many teachers through their work. Obviously, we couldn't get everybody who was impacted on video. So I personally think that the relationship with NeuroLogic, it was extremely powerful. I believe we're headed in the right direction regarding our work with NeuroLogic, and I'm excited to continue our journey with them moving forward. And we do have some quotes, some testimonials from some other Upper Darby teachers who you may not have seen in our video. I won't read them out loud. I'll give you a moment to take a look at them.
So looking ahead to this coming school year, NeuroLogic will continue to support the district staff very much in the same manner in which they were last year through the online learning platform and with the school-based specialists. So they will continue to support our elementary and secondary teachers and have access to that online component. One of the biggest pieces is the push next year. We're going to shift to begin to develop future trauma-informed leaders within our school district. So we talked a lot this year about looking ahead to our continued work with this, but Josh has said on many occasions that it's his goal to work himself out of a job with us. So we have worked very closely with him and his team to make sure that there is a plan starting this coming year to really start to phase NeuroLogic out and to create leaders within the district who can continue this work for the future. In doing this, we've already started. We had a part of our leadership retreat. We spent about 3 hours with Josh and Janine and Nathan, focusing primarily on self-care, but all of the administrators received an additional training session during our administrative retreat. And one of the things that we did discuss is making sure that we are developing plans with each school for long-term implementation and maintenance of trauma-informed practices. So every school, the expectation this coming year, working with really Janine primarily, but also with Josh and the school-based coaches, is to have their own team and their own plan for how we're going to continue to move this work forward, not just this coming school year, but beyond that as well.
I just want to continue to praise the administration for bringing this forward into our school district. It is much needed and it's necessary, and it should be a part of the foundation of every educational institution. So I just hope that we can continue to move forward with the amount of, making it a part of the institution. I just think it's so important, so thank you.
Ms. Mitchell, if I can, I just want to add that Senate Bill 144, Act 18 of 2019, Trauma-Informed Education Act 44, requires trauma-informed education now, not only for teachers, and I was sharing this with Josh the other day because Josh and the team provided a presentation and professional development to administrators during our retreat in July. But school board members have to go through trauma-informed care, professional development, and training as well. So we'll be working on putting that in place with the school board, that it's a requirement as well under Act 44.
I just had a quick question. You've worked with other districts, obviously, with trauma-informed care. I just wanted to get a feel for, since we had such a positive experience in our first year, really implementing it fully, I'm curious to know if other districts have seen even a more increase in like year 2 or year 3 implementing this program moving forward and realize more benefits.
Yeah, thank you. So what we've seen is absolutely, it takes about 3 years till you're really seeing a significant change. But the other thing that I would say is that your district took a really substantial step forward. Some districts that we work with try and see what's kind of the least resistant path forward. And I felt as though your district very appropriately decided, you know what, we want to make this a statement about how we're really going to be proceeding forward. And so with that in mind, I do believe that 2 years is a reasonable time to not see these unbelievable change. It's a multi-year process for sure, but with what we said of beginning the process now of working ourselves out of a job where with a lot of the districts in the past, it's been more year 3 that we've been doing that process. Thank you.
One of the frustrations, or a lot of the frustrations when you hear about this, and I know Mrs. Simone went to a training at the IU on engaging students in poverty, and it talks about dieting, it talks about a lot of engagement strategies. When you hear from Lakeside and you hear from the teachers and you go through the training and you hear the scientific research and the brain development, it contradicts the pressure of what's being put into classrooms on teachers right now. So part of the frustration that I hope we can get to Harrisburg or somebody else with is they're not meshing together. The student achievement testing system related to what kids are going through and what we're facing in a country, especially in places where there's poverty, the scientific evidence is clear that you're not going to get that part to change unless this part is there first. And we're putting all of our emphasis and on that end of it. And I think there needs to be more of a training, even if school boards have to go through the training. Maybe the folks who make the decisions have to go through it understanding what it is. Because I will say, in full disclosure, we're ahead of the curve. It's now required. We were, in some ways, and I'll say it publicly, mocked by some members of the public who said, really, Dan, trauma? Who hasn't been through trauma? And it was kind of like a mockery of why we would be in the place of having this here in our schools. And the reality is, kids need it, people need it. And when you go in, you have these expectations of classes to be able to cope and get through. It's an important piece. So compliments to the board and to you, all of you and Josh, the work that you're doing and the excellent work that's happening in the school district. We're going to keep pushing it forward, so I appreciate that.
I know a few of us were at the kickoff training in August, and we're very impressed. So thanks for including us in that. As far as what the contract is, I'm assuming it's budgeted for the next school year. And are there options, or are we going full steam ahead for something? Like, what's the plan?
So there are 2 options that were presented to us. The one option that we are looking at is the same option that we have this year. It is funded through Title II funds. So the cost is not coming out of the district budget, it's coming out of title funds.
Are there any other questions from board members? All right, thank you so much. The next agenda item is Stop the Violence Grant Partnership with the DCIU.
Hi, good evening. And to complement the work that we're doing with trauma-informed care across the district, Dr. McGarry, myself, and some members of my team, heard about a great opportunity through our Delaware County Intermediate Unit to provide additional training for staff in trauma-informed care and becoming a trauma-sensitive school. So tonight I'm going to present to you an informational item about what that's going to look like for our district, for our high school in particular, over the next 3 years. We're fortunate enough to be one of the very few schools in the county to be selected to be a part of this grant through our Delaware County Intermediate Unit. Miss Tracy Wise from from DCIU has been wonderful with us and getting us set up. We have a point person through the DCIU to help us kind of navigate through this process. And what it looks like over the next 3 years. And it's called Stop the Violence Grant. And it's geared towards, the grant part of this is geared towards training our staff to become trainers in certain programs and training opportunities to turn it around and train our staff. And I'll walk you through what that will look like. So this was year one, 18-19 school year. And the goal of this year was to select a core team at our high school. Staff members from a cross-section from all different disciplines, some administrators and central office administrators as well, to go through a self-assessment to determine where we were or where we are as a school or as a high school in the areas of trauma-informed care and being trauma-sensitive and being aware of what trauma looks like and feels like for our kids in our high school. Next year, it will be the bulk of the training. The big part of the grant comes into play. We're going to have parts of our team broken out to go to train the trainer sessions. And some of them are actually pretty interesting and pretty intense trainings, one being youth mental health first aid. A few of us are going to become trainers in that and be certified to train and turn around that program to members of our high school staff. Some will go to our prepare training, become train the trainers again. We're lucky enough to have trainers in our district already, so in addition to that as well. And last but not least, as well, two in particular, staff members going to be trained to turn around Lakeside Global Institute's training, the Trauma 101 through 106 courses, 2-hour courses, to become certified trainers in those courses through Lakeside Global Institute or Global Network. And then the idea behind next year is to train our people, our core team, train them internally, and then map out a professional development plan for our high school in conjunction with Ms. Kelly and Ms. Simone and her team to then turn around to the high school over the next multiple years moving forward to train different departments, different groups of teachers, or teacher leaders within their, or new teachers for that matter, on an ongoing basis and rolling it over each and every year to become a trauma-sensitive school. This is in conjunction with what we're doing with Lakeside already, so it won't be in place of, it'll be in addition to. But again, the goal of this is to really inform our teachers and to train our teachers to be more aware of what trauma looks like. And again, the goal of that would be to then your response as a teacher or as a staff member could differ if you're aware of what our students are going through and what trauma looks like. And a lot of the trainings that you see up there will do just that over the next couple of years. If you go to the next slide, thank you. So again, you see, it's only a 3-year plan initially with the grant opportunity, but we're going to continue this as an ongoing base to continue to train our staff moving forward. But again, a really neat opportunity. Dr. McGarry and I kind of talked about it, so we have to do this. We have to bring it, and our high school is the place we thought would be the biggest need. We were advised it might be tough to do it at the high school because it is so big and there's so many departments, so many different groups of people. But like Upper Darby's history, we don't want to turn away from a challenge. So we picked a high school and we're going to do it. We're going to do it really well. So we're looking forward to it. Any questions from me, for us?
It's great. I'm glad that we have this opportunity. I hope it works.
Mrs. Mitchell, just to go back to your previous question with the plan and the contract. So the option that's the same, just to give you a little bit more detail, there'll be 2 school-based NeuroLogic specialists. There will be a lead coach, which would be Janine, who's been working in our secondary schools. And we're going to continue with the online platform for any new staff coming into the district. So that is sustained as well, like a learning management system. So the total price of that is $197,000, which is covered by title funds. So just to give you some clarity on that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Just to add on to another comment that was made by Ms. Curry before about the trauma-informed care plan. This is something we're going to continue to do clearly with the work we put in place with Lakeside. But my department next year is focusing on developing our social and emotional learning program and making that part of what we do. We have a lot of things that we do already that we presented to you in February as part of the PACE survey and the options that we have and that we deliver to our students through student services. But we're going to be tying it all together and mapping it with Ms. Kelly and her team and my team on what that looks like each and every day within our district. And this will be a major part, a big part of what our SEL program looks like here in Upper Darby, which we'll present to you at some point next school year towards the end of the year when it is towards completion.
Great, thank you. The next agenda item is the elementary school youth court.
Okay, good evening again, everyone. I'm joined here with me is Alan Bridges, the principal of Garrettford Elementary School. And we are excited to talk to you about something that many members of the board are very familiar with in terms of our youth court program. We have 2 programs currently running at Beverly Hills Middle School and 1 at Drexel Hill Middle School. These are both 8th grade elective courses, full-year courses that meet every day for 48 minutes a day. And we first started these sections in the 2017-18 school year. Upper Darby High School, we then brought the youth court program to the high school, and it's elective for all students, and that first started in the 2018-19 school year. We're here this evening to talk to you about our initiative in bringing this program to our 5th grade, some of our 5th grade students, and we are specifically targeting Garrettford and Stonehurst Hills Elementary Schools. 1 5th grade class at each of these schools for this coming school year. There are some elementary youth court sections running in our area. These are just a few of the schools listed here in our surrounding area. There are more throughout Philadelphia specifically. But our partnership with Greg Voles, the attorney who has helped us really bring this to Upper Darby School District, has worked directly with these schools and has successfully implemented youth courts at the elementary level. Most of these are 5th grade youth courts, but also some of them are 4th grade, and they are looking to expand maybe even into 3rd grade, believe it or not, for some of these schools. But our focus, again, will be on the 5th grade. So this has been a process going back to really last spring, this past spring. Alan and his team at Garrettford and Aranda Buford as the principal of Stonehurst Hills and her team, we started some initial meetings with Greg Voles and having some conversations about whether or not we thought this was going to be a feasible idea for us here in Upper Darby School District. And we had a number of meetings, just really kind of kicking around some ideas about how this would be implemented, where in the schedule is it going to fit, how many schools should we include, and really the reason that we selected Garrettford and Stonehurst is Aranda has experience in working with Mr. Voles before she came to Upper Darby School District, so we felt that that would be a good fit in terms of her knowledge base, and she was 100% on board with the idea and has been really asking for it for some time at Stonehurst Hills. And Alan recently brought on Rob Thorham as a lead teacher at Garrettford Elementary School. He started just this past school year there. He came to Alan and Garrettford from Beverly Hills Middle School. He was a social studies teacher there, and he actually was a part of the initial phase at the middle school level and the training, so it just made sense to also then have Rob and his skill set and knowledge base, having taught the program and gone through the training. So that's why we selected those 2 schools specifically to really initially roll this out. After our meetings, we took a team, Alan included, to go to the Chester Upland School of the Arts, and we visited their youth court program one of the last weeks of the school year, so it was hot, and obviously the attention level wasn't extremely high, but the kids were fantastic. They were very accommodating, everyone at the school. With a bunch of strangers walking into their 5th grade classroom at the end of the school year. But we were really taken back by just the level of interaction, just the way that the students really managed to, even in the 5th grade, run the class almost entirely on their own with very little, if any, input or guidance from their teacher, even with a bunch of guests in the room, kind of just watching them and taking notes. And that was one of our main reasons for the visit, the question of, is this really possible at the elementary level? Are they mature enough as 5th graders to really be able to pull this off? And the kids in 5th grade at the Chester Upland School for the Arts really proved to us that it was 100% possible. And then we had some professional development. It was at Garrettford. Alan hosted the PD. We had members of the staff of Stonehurst Hills and Garrettford there. Alan was a part of that training. His teacher, Rob Thorham, had already been through the training, so he was not there, but we had the lead teacher, Liz Terrell, from Stonehurst, the interim principal, Jen Holstein, there, Margarita Christopheridis, the social worker at Stonehurst, attended the training, and we had both teachers. We had April from Stonehurst Hills, and we had Alec from Garrettford attend the training as well. Greg Voles, the attorney, like I had mentioned before, the Harkin College Youth Court Director, and Kathy Smith, the Associate Professor at Law and Legal Studies at Chestnut Hill College. They really led that training and took the team through that training, which was about a month ago, believe it or not. So again, I really want to impress upon everyone that we are starting very small here. I would prefer maybe to not start as small as we are, but really the main reason for this is the schedule, to be completely honest. We know that implementing something like this, there isn't time, just idle time sitting there in the schedule throughout the course of the day. We're trying to squeeze every last minute out of ELA instruction and, yes, math, Ms. Kelly. So we know that there's always a trade-off, right? There has to be a trade-off. So we are really only looking at one section and one teacher at each of the elementary schools. And the class is going to initially just meet for once a week for 30 minutes. And this is going to happen during their MTSS reading time on Wednesdays, time that is typically dedicated for progress monitoring, time that at Garrettford, and Alan can speak to this, is used for things like PBIS lessons. We felt that would be the most natural fit. And it would be a way to implement this and take a small step into the elementary schools with our youth court initiative, and do so without the trade-off of taking away any other type of instructional time.
So Frank just kind of touched on some of the questions you may have, and they were some of the questions I had when I first was brought this by Frank, and having my lead teacher go through it, he was a huge advocate and really was leading the charge for us bringing it to Garrettford. But they were two of my questions. Can fifth graders handle this? And when are we going to do it? They're mine. I'm sure there's two of your questions. So the first thing, when we went to the Chester Upland School and we saw that fifth graders can 100% do it, they were amazing. And I'm sure we have some kids who are even more exceptional at our schools. We pride ourselves at Garrettford having some of the best kids around, and I'm sure they could do an even better job than we saw that day. So that's not a problem. But I think the big pressing question is what Frank's talking about here, is that can we fit it into the schedule? How can we fit it into the schedule? So when we looked at our schedule, Frank said that it would take place probably once a week, and looking at that MTSS reading block is the best time, because on Wednesdays that block doesn't run, so those kids aren't missing their intervention that they so desperately need, some of those kids. So they're not missing anything that they would be pulled out for. They're not missing their time with the reading specialist or their special ed teacher. That's a time where we dedicate it for progress monitoring, where the kids are getting progress monitored, or they're getting dibbles, or possibly map testing, depending on the time of the year. So those kids aren't missing any of that. What they are getting is their PBIS lesson during that time. So this is 100% a real-life PBIS lesson. So they're getting the civics and their social studies in there, but they're getting this PBIS piece that we are pushing with our kids so much through our Tier 1 teaching. So all those kids will be getting PBIS lessons on playground behavior and on safety in the bathrooms, safety on the bus, auditorium behavior, all those things. And some of those actual cases that we plan to bring to that are on those issues, things that are happening on the playground, things that are happening in the auditorium, things that are happening on the bus. So it just kind of merges itself and meshes itself really well together.
Speaking of the progress monitoring, we are going to do our own monitoring of the progress of the overall impact that this is having. We already have survey questions that we've developed in partnership with Greg Voles to push out to the students at the fifth grade level that will be participating in these sections. They're going to do more or less a pre-youth court survey and then complete the same survey at the end of the year. We're obviously also very interested in recidivism and if at all, the youth court program at the elementary level and also at the secondary levels, if it's having an impact in terms of the level of consequences and the repeat offenders. Some of the goals and benefits, again, these are things that we have discussed both at the middle school, high school level, and are going to hold true at the elementary levels. Just student empowerment. We are really pushing a continued push on a focus on restorative practices and restorative dispositions, giving the administrators, the lead teachers in the school district, an opportunity to have a disposition other than just detention or suspension. And this does provide that, and I can speak to that firsthand. Civic engagement, public speaking, and socialization. One of the things in talking to the teacher of the classroom that we visited, she said, some of the students that really had a prominent role on the youth court panel as the youth advocate, either that or as a member of the juror, they were asking really good questions. You could not get a word out of these students in September and October, she said. Some of the growth that these students showed And she really attributed that 100% to their engagement in the youth court process and their, really taking ownership of that and becoming much more comfortable with public speaking and that social aspect of it. What questions do you have for us?
So I just have a question because I was able to come in and see the youth court at Drexel Hill when you were there, Mr. Salerno. And I know that it takes a long time to kind of teach them that court process. So for 30 minutes a week, when do you propose that these children will start to actually get involved in the case management of it?
That's an excellent question. And, again, if we had our way, and this is something as we go down the road of potentially forming an action research group, looking at the elementary schedule yet again, it's something I would like to do. Ideally, we're meeting more than once a week for 30 minutes. I think this is, it's not in place of instructional time. This is instructional time. We have to stop looking at it through the lens of this is less important than anything else. I think this is just as important, maybe arguably even more important than some of the other basic content skills that we are teaching. It's going to take much longer. I mentioned that Drexel Hill and Beverly Hills have sections running that meet every day for 48 minutes, and not until maybe, December January, are they really able to start hearing cases. To be honest, the class at the Chester Upland School for the Arts, they only were able to hear a handful of cases because they had a very similar model to ours with the same constraints, really, in terms of expectations of student achievement and minutes of ELA and math instruction. So it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. But we are going to do our best, and Alan and Aranda and Dr. Wallace, she did a lot of talking about restorative justice and her experience in restorative practices during her interview process. We know it's going to be a good fit. They're going to make it work. But you're right. It's going to be a challenge to hear the number of cases that we would like to hear. So our hope is that by the spring, they can really start to maybe hear some cases. We're going to be targeting students in 5th grade, really predominantly. 4th and 5th grade, we are not going to bring 1st or 2nd graders in front of the youth court panel or even 3rd graders. That would be way too much. So we're going to keep it to that age range and see how it goes with hopes of being able to expand it moving forward beyond this coming school year.
There's, to help answer the question as well, there's 21 lessons that prepare the class that for our training we just went through. So there's 21 lessons, and looking at those lessons, some of them can be done in 2 or 3 lessons in a day. So you're talking probably 7 or 8 sessions before they get through those 21 sessions of learning, and then they can start doing some mock trials. So that kind of helps answer the question a little bit.
So my question is kind of related to hers, to Jean. It's forward thinking and it's positive. I'm anticipating that it's going to be a big success like it's been at the secondary level. So once you have a desire to expand it, how do you envision it being? Right now it'll be 30 minutes. Once a week. So what's the goal? Like, where do you want to see it ending up? How often? And I know that's. So best case scenario, if Dr. McGarry was on board, what do you? How would you want it?
What that schedule look like?
Right. Yeah. Actually, I have a follow-up slide here. I'm going to give you a proposed schedule. It's built around youth court. No, there is time. There is time that we know that in terms of just looking at the minutes of the elementary school schedule, there is time. There's time for what is currently being used predominantly throughout the district at the elementary level during that MTSS math time, which was initially an additional 30 minutes of just based on the need of the students. It didn't have to be specific to math. It could be any number of things. It could be writing. It could be math. It could be. So there is some time that we can get creative with. It also makes sense to try to infuse this with our social studies program as well. It just lends itself so naturally to the standards that are addressed in social studies. The only problem is we do not teach social studies the entire year, so that's only taught for half of the school year. So it would make sense to maybe just sprinkle it in and layer the current social studies curriculum with embed lessons within youth court. So that's an option too that we are looking at. The only thing is, Mr. Brown, that is, again, that's only 2 semesters out of the year. So it doesn't make sense to me to only do it first and second quarter and then not have youth court at all third and fourth. So this was a way for us to be creative in trying to expand it throughout the entire school year.
And I tease about the schedule because, you know, Frank and the team, they did want to revisit the schedule, and it's just a messy thing. But one of the other pieces that I think we have to look at too is maybe we have to, because the state is changing the requirements in elementary school for STEM and their other standards, the elementary specials would be another area where you could look to add this into the library class or to those other classes that could fit in for more of a rotation in the schedule.
Is there any way, I know this might be a stretch, but thinking about like after-school club, and the reason why I bring it up is because when I think about the excitement that the kids had at the program that I did see, and then just helping them to build their role, I don't know how it would work. I mean, because of course, it would take teachers extra time, people volunteering, but it's such an amazing program, and just looking at restorative practices and then bringing in the things that the district is working on with trauma-informed care and, you know, just having that whole, like, model. I'm just curious if, like, you know, there's different clubs that are exclusive to fourth and fifth graders because they're at the higher level of the school. And I don't know, it's just a thought that something that could maybe be a progressive move towards increasing the participation.
It's a great idea, and many other schools that have youth court, that's their only option. It's outside of the school day, because there just is, again, getting back to that same conversation. But if we were to, that's a good way of maybe still having it in the school day, but then, you know, right now we are only looking at a small group of students, 2 sections of students at 2 schools. So the conversation was, you know, hopefully the conversation is, well, wait a minute, just because my child didn't have Mr. McKnight at Garrettford, they're missing out on an opportunity to be exposed to this. And that's a good problem to have, and I think an after-school club would open it up to anyone who is interested. But you're right, the key word there is then voluntary, so you're looking for adults to be able to volunteer their time after school, you know, transporting the students home after school, making sure that, but it's definitely something other school districts have explored the option of doing, and it's their only option in some instances. So I think it's a great idea to be able to open it up to more students, absolutely.
Even if you use the after-school model to get them trained faster, because obviously only 30 minutes a day, it'll take a long time to get them up to speed, to get all the information, so that might be an option to get them up to speed faster so they can hear cases sooner.
Any other comments or questions from the board? All right, thank you. The next step is the MAP annual growth review.
So I wanted to give just a brief reminder of what MAP is. So it is an online benchmark assessment that we use K through 10 in those grades. We also give it to special ed students all the way up to grade 12. But it's an online assessment. It's administered 3 times a year throughout the district. It's given in the fall, it's given in the winter, and then it's given again in the spring. It's a personalized assessment also, so it adapts to the student's level, and that's the beauty of the software that is developed through MAP. So as a student continues to get questions right, it keeps building them up to a grade level that they are responding to the questions, or then it brings them down also if they're not able to respond at their grade level. So it does adapt to each student's needs. It produces something called a RIT score. And we've said this over and over again, but just to give everybody an idea of when we start to talk about the MAP scores that we are receiving and the growth that we're seeing throughout the school year, that what the language is, so everybody is aware. So this RIT score enables the teachers to see growth over time, and that's the beauty of this test as well. It always is using the same RIT score, and so from when a student goes from first to second grade, it's still using the same RIT score, so they're not starting over again, and it continues to build as they proceed through our school district. And now that we have the assessment K through 10 or K through 9, and then 10, 11, and 12 for students that are in need of it, it is an even playing field, so you do see the growth throughout our school district. It also is a helpful tool, or most importantly, it is a tool for teaching for our teachers. So it produces a learning continuum, and it tells the teachers the skills that students are ready to learn. And that's very important. It tells us where we can reinforce our skills and what our students are now ready to learn. And it is nationally normed as well as aligned to the PA course standards. How it's used throughout the school district, in the elementary school, and you'll see throughout all of our schools, it is a teaching tool to inform instruction, so I'm not going to read that over and over again. However, in the elementary schools, the middle schools, and high schools, we do use it in a little bit different manner each time. In the elementary schools, we use it to set student goals, and we also use it as part of our data meeting process that we continually refine as teachers are getting more and more accustomed to using the reports. We started using, this is only the second year, going into the third year of using it in the elementary schools. However, we've been using it in the middle and the high schools for quite some time now. In the middle schools, we also use it as a placement tool for any intervention, so we can really see the exact intervention that students need that supports the skills that are produced by that learning continuum that teachers can see. And also in the high school, we use it as the same way as we start to put more in students, getting them into the exact intervention that they need. As we look at math growth throughout the district for the 18-19 school year, this is the visual of what is occurring during the school year. So observed growth is what the students are actually getting in our school district. So if you look at the blue bars, that's where we are. They're the scores that we are hitting. That's the growth that we are making. The projected growth is what the MAP test, with all of their software and everything else, tells us the orange diamond is where we should be. So you'll see in a first grade in math, we are hitting where we should be. We are growing students. They are reaching where they should be reaching. In second grade, we are growing even more kids. So now the bar is above the diamond there in second grade math. In third grade, we start to see a little bit of a fall. So that would be an area of concern. I know that Rob looks at this frequently. I'll tell you that he's been looking at this. A reason for that right there in third grade is because your standards start to shift a little bit. You start to develop the algebraic concepts there. So students do start to trickle off, and then you start to see in fourth grade the catch-up of that. So the orange diamond starts to shift, and the bar gets higher there as well. So you'll see visually that's what's occurring. We are making growth in our school district using the MAP data. In ninth grade, you see a very large uptick of growth and students making growth. But you'll see that the bar is a little bit shorter there. As you get further and further up in these grades, the amount of growth that you can make on the MAP test gets smaller and smaller and smaller. The RIT scores get closer and closer together. So in ninth grade, that's why you see that. But we do see growth. We do see some areas that we do have to look into. You'll see that third grade mark, and again, that sixth grade mark. Those transition years with your standards is where you tend to see that. And they are an area of focus for us in math. Looking at the same report in reading, again, the observed growth of the blue bars, where we are trying to get the projected growth are the orange diamonds. Again, first grade, doing a good job. We are hitting where we should. Second grade, again, the orange diamond and the blue bar are hitting each other. And then third grade, you start to see that dip again. Again, Sue Ortley has been looking at this as well. That's where you start to see more of that text-dependent analysis, that shift in not learning to read, but using your learning to read. Or reading to learn, excuse me. So you start to see a shift again there in your standards. You also see the same growth in ninth grade there. So you start to see the dips in the same places in both math and reading, but we are making growth in both places. So what kind of questions do we have?
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, it just popped into my head. Maybe we can look at it. Years ago, Eileen Hirschman and I used to look at different data tools, and we did it by hand. But what we found was from kindergarten through third grade, we would see a downturn in some of the data because from kindergarten to third grade, it was like a 20% transiency, meaning that kids would stay kindergarten first and second, and then third grade there'd be 250 or 300 kids in a cohort new that were not with us in kindergarten, first and second grade, and there was like 10% shift in some of the data. Maybe that's something to look at as well, not just to mention the standard shift there, but also to maybe say, look at this data with Upper Darby kids that have been here kindergarten through third, and then kids that are coming in and see what that looks like as well.
I remember doing that. Eileen's in the audience, so Eileen, we have a job tomorrow.
I'm assuming too that the new curriculum might be addressing some of these issues that we're seeing, especially in third and fourth grade. I know that was one of the key points, text-dependent analysis.
Exactly. And as we start to look at the learning continuum, the exact skills that we have to drill down on, we're going to start looking at where the majority of the students are falling. What it does is it breaks down, for a teacher's classroom, it breaks down exactly which students are struggling in those specific skills. The wonderful part about our new series is it does not have a ton of whole group instruction. It has a lot of small group instruction where teachers can be using that data to drive those small groups and what students really, really need. And that's what Sue presented when she presented the program as those small circles and what's happening in those in a balanced literacy approach.
Thank you. Any
You're
other
welcome.
questions from board members?
So we were just looking at the difference with the kindergarten AM and PM. So it looks different for the reading. That's math, but the reading, it seems to be a little bit of a disparity. Do you know what that's attributed to?
I don't, I mean, from the report in front of me, the student count is a little bit off, but nothing that would jump out at me. It could just be the makeup of the students that are being tested at that time. In first grade, we start to see a balance out again, so it just could be the group of students that are tested in the AM versus the PM in reading.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess we can move on at this point to the elementary science STEM resources.
Okay. So now we're going to go on to STEM and the STEM resources. So the STEM resources, Beth was not able to be here. She's traveling somewhere right now with her family. So I said I would take this. You don't have to come back to present this. But she is very passionate about this. STEM, which she asked me to remind you, is STEM is not just concentrating on the science, engineering, technology, and math. It really is starting to incorporate all of the other pieces as well. I mean, I'm going to give you an example of how it does incorporate everything. People mainly look at the science, the engineering, the technology, and math, but there is more to it just because of how how it's promoting thinking, really, and that's what it is. The materials that I'm going to present would all be purchased through the LEG grant. So remember, we do have that $3.5 million of the LEG grant money, and we also have $175,000 of the LEG grant money as well. This would be using the $175,000 piece of the LEG grant because we were talking about promoting thinking. We were talking about career paths. We were talking about design thinking, and that's what this really promotes. So we would be using a fraction of that money for this, and I will get into the costs in a second. What the resources that we were looking at that we are asking for board approval on are called Picture Perfect STEM. And our coaches, as well as Beth, have been attending conferences outside of the school district to learn more about STEM and how to incorporate it. These are resources for the teacher to use to promote STEM and design thinking throughout their classrooms. It aligns also to the literacy skills, so it builds in or pulls in reading as well. And that's why STEM, we have to sort of start thinking outside of the box on STEM, that it is incorporating the literacy skills and the writing skills and everything else also. It aligns to our standards, and it encourages students to really start to apply their learning. The program components of Picture Perfect STEM, it incorporates nonfiction and fiction books. and as well as materials and activities. So I wanted to give you an example here. So in third grade currently, we talk about pollination with a bee, and they talk about it through their plant growth and development science unit. And what our students typically do is they make a paper model of a bee. Now, in the new lesson, they don't make a paper bee anymore. What they do is they design a tool and the shape of a flower to figure out how the bee would pollinate that shaped flower. So you see the difference between the thinking. So now they're designing something rather than just creating the paper bee. And they're working together in groups to really think about, okay, well, what would happen? What does the shape of this flower need to look like so the bee can populate it? So that's the change in thinking, and that's the shift. They read the stories, what is pollination as the fiction story, and then flowers are calling as opposite. Your flowers are calling as your fiction story, and your what is pollination as your nonfiction story as they go through these lessons. They take about 3 to 5 days, but we're already spending those 3 to 5 days talking about this topic, so it's really just replacing the lesson that we currently do with something new, with new resources, up-to-date resources. Implementation, like I just said, supplementing or replacing some lessons in the current curriculum. Once this gets approved, Beth will start working with her team and the coaches on changing some of the curriculum maps that are already established and pulling out the lessons that could be infused with the STEM resources. After school professional development sessions for teachers, so we'll start small there, and we'll also be using the grade level meetings as well to really push this information out to the teachers and help them plan lessons. Our coaches in science and social studies coaches have been modeling a ton of different lessons and have been in and out of classrooms modeling how this would look and how the students can interact, as well as serving as an extra set of hands, because there's more materials out now, but that's how students learn to design and do these things. The cost, so the money from the lead grant would be about $97,000 that would come out of this. The books are about $18,000, materials $56,000, and the teacher guides and training guides are listed as well. The other thing is that there is an annual cost for some of the materials. It's about $9,000, but Beth already has some of that money allocated to science resources as well already. So what she'll start to do is take the things that aren't used as much and replace them. We met with Joe McGilvery not too long ago to start looking at that process of what we don't have to order anymore and what would be replaced as we start to move in this direction if it is approved. And that's it. Are there any questions on that?
It's an exciting time in elementary school.
It is. It is. Are there any questions on the 4 policies we have?
Policy, the first policy, 150, with the Title I comparability of services. What are it talks about the distribution of funds for schools that are receiving Title I funds currently. So what's the breakdown, the total breakdown of what schools aren't receiving the funds? I thought right now that most of the schools in the district were receiving the funds. Can you help to just clarify that?
Right, so the changes to this policy are really, they're not substantial. We already do a lot of the things in this policy as it is. So we distribute the money, based upon, what we're allocated as a district to our Title I schools. The purpose of the revision of this policy was kind of clarifying some of the language and making it very specific in terms of what our responsibilities are as a district to account for those funds and what we do with it, which we already were doing as past practice.
Yes, I have a couple questions. Policy 220, the changes seem reasonable to me, but I'm a little bit concerned that I haven't seen. I'm a little bit concerned about moving this forward because I haven't yet seen feedback from our solicitor on these changes, but my significant concern, though, is with Policy 239, foreign exchange students, and the prohibition thereof. I concur with our solicitor's feedback on this proposed change that we should essentially provide a structure, some structure and some guidelines in terms of why or how the superintendent might choose to deny an application for a foreign exchange student. So I would question moving this policy forward in the light of both my opinion, my belief on this, and the solicitor's belief that giving the superintendent authority to decline applications without any type of guideline for the decision is a concern of mine.
There are currently, under the Pennsylvania guidelines, back procedures as far as visas and what type of students we're allowed to have permitted. Kyle did provide feedback. It was provided as far as the policy changes and updates. We can, again, send that out to the board and to Mr. Desnoyers. The comments that Kyle had made, too, was not that the superintendent can't be trusted to make these decisions. Rather, it would be in our best interest maybe to say what some other school districts say, which is we'll approve groups that are already recognized groups for foreign exchange students. Some of the problems that we face as a school district is, and I just had a phone call today in my office with Dr. Manfrey and Eileen Hirschman over, we have students who leave the country, don't tell us where they're going, don't come back for 40, 50, 60 days. There are other things that are in play, things like human trafficking and different aspects that come into play, that there's a much bigger picture with some of this that other school districts maybe don't face that we face and we've been through over the last several years. So it wasn't simply a situation we were saying we don't want to have this in place that way. We want to follow the current BEC that allows certain type of visas that allow foreign exchange students. And I agree with Kyle's point. Perhaps we want to add simply some language that says maybe to approve recognized programs that are in that position. The third piece, in full disclosure, also when I was the assistant superintendent, we don't really have the resources or room currently to take on additional students in the school district. That was another part of the process. So those are the three reasons why we were looking to really close around this. One, the fear of the human trafficking piece of it, the oversight of that. If you've seen in the news recently in the last couple of years, there are some concerns with some of the local school districts who've gone through some of these as well. And so we can add some language if the board's not comfortable moving forward with it. Superintendent discretion, I think, would be one that would be trusted to do that in some kind of an AR, administrative regulation, that we would put together to do those things. But to Mr. Desnoyers' point, if the board would like us to put that specific language outwardly in the policy, we can certainly make those changes. As far as the 220, the recommendations from the solicitor that were sent, where there are ors in the policy that were recommended to take out, and we did not take that out without having a conversation publicly rather than making a decision without public discussion, was that the solicitor recommended that the ors might not be a good idea to take out because it may be interpreted by the administration that we're getting involved in situations outside of school, and that off-campus threats or that cause serious harm to the community should be school community, not just the community, because we, again, have to be careful with overextending ourselves and how we're getting involved in discipline outside of the school day. So Mr. Berman did provide feedback on all of the policies, 220, as well as the policy that Neil Desnoyer is referring to as far as 239 is concerned. So if we go back to 220, one of the comments would be put the ors back in, even though PSBA recommended taking them out. It might be in the best interest to keep them in. And that the community should really be referring to school community and what's happening in school property rather than getting yourself involved in off-campus activities.
As far as these four policies, policy 150, is that PSBA recommendation?
Correct.
Policy 220 as well?
Correct.
Policy 239?
Correct.
And policy?
Policy 230.
No, we have a PSBA policy. The original part of it was to put some closure to limiting the type and the number of that's in place. So that part is true.
Okay, and policy 335, is that PSBA recommended language as well?
Yes.
Correct.
Policy 335, the language that's in that requiring versus may, was there, with the PSBA recommendation, with the concurrent, that means that the reason for the change of the language is so that the employee would have to take their time, the way I'm understanding it, take their time that they had, vacation, sick, whatever, to run during that FMLA period.
Correct.
And it wasn't like that before.
That is the way it was before. This clarifies what needs to happen.
And as far as the portion where it changes to the Director of Human Resources, that's just a title change for us. Okay. Is there any other comments, questions, or concerns from board members about the four policies? Okay, at this time, we'll move into the portion of the meeting of public comment. Please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and please let us know which agenda item you are commenting on. Okay, I don't see any public comments, so I guess we'll review the agenda at this time. Mrs. Kelly?
Item number 1 was the trauma-informed care. The first part, 1819 review, was informational, but the second part, the 1920, the plan and contract will require board action moving forward.
Okay, is everyone okay with that? Yeah, all right, we're good. Okay. Stop the Violence was informational, right?
Correct.
Elementary Youth Court informational.
Yes.
Informational for item number 4 for the map. And then number 5, elementary science STEM resources. Are we all okay with moving that forward? Yes. Yes? Okay, great. All right, policies. We'll take them individually just because there does seem to be some concerns. Policy 150, are we okay moving that forward? Yes? Policy 220, student expression distribution. Everyone's okay with that? Okay. Policy 239, foreign exchange students. Okay, so I just have one dissenter, I believe. More descriptive, so that's 2. Okay, anyone else?
Perhaps if we can, we've done this similarly in the past, if we add some of that language and then bring it to the second reading and have more of a conversation there, if the board is okay with that piece, as far as it really adding light to what I can do as a superintendent or my responsibilities. I don't know if that would be a substantial change, correct, Kyle? That way we could, if it's okay, to Mr. Desnoyer's point, then it could be a discussion at the second reading as well.
Policy 335, family and medical leaves. Okay, all right. In that case, there's a motion in order for adjournment. All in favor? Aye. Good night, everyone.